Now it's my pleasure to introduce Nancy Naomi Carlson. She is, first of all, a beloved instructor and family member of the Writer Center, but she's also twice an NEA Literature Translation Fellow, authored An Infusion of Violets, published by Seagull in 2019, and named New and Noteworthy by the New York Times. And Nancy, thank you again. Thank you so much for joining us. I hand off to you now to kick off the real part of this programming. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you for that great introduction. And the Writers Center is actually where I started writing poetry. I took a class at the Writers Center, so it's very near and dear to me. And they've been very generous with readings and all kinds of things. And Poet Laura is great. And the people at the Writers Center are very welcoming. And many of you know that because many of you are DC based. I want to thank Zach. I want to thank the Writers Center. I want to thank my readers. My readers, they're not my readers, it's our readers, and especially to the audience who's here. And speaking about our readers, we are readers from 101 Jewish poems for the Third Millennium. And the cover was designed by Jody Sachs. This is a wedding ring, a double Jewish wedding ring. And Claire, and I will mispronounce her last name with a Z, was the one who put the design in. So this book has a lot of my friends in it. It has a lot of artist friend input. It's just very near and dear to my heart, but it's not my work alone. And in fact, it's the brainchild of Matthew Silverman. And Matthew Silverman said to me, I want to do this anthology, another anthology of Jewish writing, and would you be willing to co-edit? And I thought, co-edit an anthology? I've never done that before. I don't know that this is something I really want to get into. I don't know. But I knew he had done an anthology or two before. So I thought, well, why don't I agree? So I did, and we put out a call, and we got 800 poems in response to our call. 800. So that meant we had to go through all of them, and that took months and months. Then we had to communicate with everybody. But the biggest thing was finding a publisher. So Matthew is great with Excel spreadsheets, with the ideas of anthologies. We really had a good division of labor. And he had everybody's poem and everybody's contact in Dropbox, which I barely fumbled my way through to be able to get on. And then I emailed a zillion publishers. And I was really surprised, but pleased at many of the encouraging responses. And we had a couple of offers, some where if we paid our way, we could have the book published, or there would be a GoFundMe. But then Ashland called me up and they said, we really, really want to do this anthology. And I was shocked. And they said, but you have to be willing to, and they listed the things, and they were fine to me. So we were fortunate to get a publisher fairly early on. They've been wonderful with us. Jen Rathbun has been our main contact as the associate editor there. And she has been so supportive of this anthology. So we've got today 17 readers, give or take, and they're each going to read 4 minutes. And if we have any time, because I think an hour and a half is about all we can hang in there for, we'll see if there's any time for any question and answer period that you may have any questions for any of our readers. So with that, I am really honored to introduce our first reader, Doritt Carroll, who is an attorney from Washington, D.C. She recently won the Laura Lee Washburn Chapbook Prize from Harbor Review. Welcome, Doritt.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for everyone for being here and including me. Sorry for the bird. This is the poem in the book. It's called The Jew I Used to Be. The Jew I used to be believed the light looked different on Rosh Hashanah. The Jew I used to be thought the angels really did look down, although they never cared what they saw. That girl whose teeth gapped in a jack-o'-lantern smile thought the autumn air smelled holy if holy meant rotting leaves with a shot of gin. Watched the shadows of bare branches write a scripture on the sidewalk, thought the slats of golden light were a picket fence that held us in our pen of otherness. This other is a new work, not explicitly about Judaism, but about my very Jewish parents, called Higher Mathematics. If my mother was the numeral, my father was the superscript, a necessary multiplier of the numerals' beauty and vivacity, but smaller and off to the side. Or maybe he was her denominator, holding her up the way a Thanksgiving table holds up dinner, displaying it proudly, waiting for it to split. Once in the garden, my father asked me, "Do you know what happens when your mother loves your brother?" "She hates you," I said, not even looking up. Math is easy. "And what happens when mommy loves me?" "She hates Mike," I said, kicking a weed. "And that, clever girl," he said, smiling because I got another answer right, "is what in math we call a zero-sum game." Now I'm delighted to introduce David Ebenbach, who is the author of the poetry collection Some Unimaginable Animal and 7 other books of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction.
Thank you so much. That was great, and I am honored to be among you. I'm going to read 2 poems, starting with the one that's in the collection. I teach at a Catholic school, and so that's produced some interesting cross-cultural encounters. This poem is called While They Choose a New Pope, I Eat a Bagel. These are old occupations. In Vatican City, there is no Wi-Fi, not until after they've sent their white smoke rising. Black smoke means they're still at it. Here it would mean the bagel's burning. There's no white kind. They used to carry them around on sticks, which is why the hole in the middle, and we keep it even though sometimes the butter ends up pooling right in the center of the plate. We keep things the way they are. The cardinals, do they sit around a table, a dark table older than America? They may have bagels of their own, though it's hard to imagine them licking cream cheese off their thumbs. But things do change. They used to lock the bishops in the chapel until they got it done, and now there are hotels and buses. They wake up to a coffee maker, maybe a continental breakfast. And I've got a toaster and a food processor to make the hummus, everything I need. There may be windows high up in the wall, shuttered. Nobody's allowed to see things in process. The cardinals crowd around, one of them almost a pope. Me, I'm already eating the bagel. And then I'll read one other poem, which I actually wrote before quarantine, but it seems to fit pretty well right now. It's called You Can't Be a Jew Alone. These days, cables and cell towers collect our prayers and carry them to all the places. A mourner's inbox, a grandmother's ear against the phone, a small white office where a rabbi leads online services. Does it make any difference to the prayers which are used to traveling underground or getting caught in the arms of trees? Still, sometimes we hold our prayers in the vault of a synagogue together, and sometimes we cry them out in a bedroom, quite alone, and they go under a pillow. Does it make any difference to God, who didn't invent prayer anyway, and to whom the whole world buzzes like that? Like power lines or cicadas hungry on the branch. I'm delighted to introduce Robert L. Giron, a poet and a writer who has work in national and international anthologies. He's the editor-in-chief of Arlijo and founder / publisher of GARDELL Press. Robert.
Thank you. Thank you for including me in this important anthology. It really means a great deal to me. I should explain that the first line of this poem I'm going to read that's in the book is in Spanish, and it basically means, they say I'm a long line of Jewish ancestry. Like the Mediterranean tide, que soy de herencia judía lejana. The desire to reconnect pulls and tugs like the Mediterranean tide. A chant, a scent, a covered portrait, not knowing why. Porque así se hace los viernes. Yes, on Fridays we cover the objects, but we're Catholic, and it's not Holy Week. You say I've a long, distant trail, muy lejana, quite far, yet the pricks hurt nonetheless. Nightmares sprung up from the Nazi plan, nights of anguish and terror a 7-year-old could not withstand. What possessed me to fight for the right to view such a film against my parents' objection, that they did not deny my plea, that it made me a pacifist and one who wept a Kaddish decades later in Angels in America, not even knowing what was said, but I felt it deep within. They say that others see what one can't yet. Years later, a simple test shows the trail, muy lejana, pero fuerte. And so I return to the tide, diluted, but vibrant as water itself. The next poem I'd like to read in honor of my great aunt, Ventura Valdez, A Stitch in Time for Ventura Valdez. Winter light rises up in smoke. I reach for my cup to warm my bones, an extra puff, and stitch to crochet this quilt. My crooked fingers frozen by blizzard snow. The stitching keeps time with the ricocheting of the cast iron stove. I breathe in and exhale like the Mediterranean upon the coast of Spain. I long for sun, hoping my quilt will catch the rays. Next is Barbara Goldberg, who is the series editor of the international editions of Word Works. Her new and selected poems, Breaking and Entering, is forthcoming.
I just wanted to say nobody mentioned how beautiful the anthology was. It really was such a pleasure to hold it and to look at the cover. Anyway, the first poem I'm going to read is Furlough. And, well, I think you can figure out where this takes place. I love to see those tall, lean, muscular men with their clean-shaven heads and digital watches toss their kids in the air. And I love to see them drop, not weightless, but light as grenades. This is how children learn that fear can be fun, and fathers, that this too is hand-to-hand combat, to cradle or kill. What story do we tell ourselves to justify? That a dunam of earth is worth dying for? That a child opening his mouth with an O of pleasure overturns everything? We grow like onions, our heads buried in dirt. And we die like onions, face down in a pot of water. Gravity causes all to fall down, and love to hold things up. And second poem I'll read is called Carvel. All those from New York will probably know what that is. Carvel, in the summer when the days were light longer, we'd pile in the car and drive down Metropolitan Avenue for soft ice cream at Carvel's. Those nights we could have been a regular American family out for a spin, whose father maybe tossed a ball with his kids, or tousled their hair, or let himself be tickled. But we knew his moods would return when we'd tiptoe around the house, lay low. This was the 50s. There was Korea, but it was far away, and it wasn't our war, and they weren't murdering our people. Later, I'd learned, but only much later, after he was long gone, that he gave our blue Persian carpet to Franz Smetana, who was broke and could sell it for cash. He also gave money to his mother's 7 brothers and sisters, and some got out in time, dispersing to Israel, Australia, South Africa, or the year he paid the bills for the Swiss sanitarium my uncle stayed at after the war to put on fat. These kindnesses, these things my father did without thinking twice what to say about them, about him, except that how a man treats his own children is only one part of the story, and there are others. Next, we'll hear from Roger Greenwald, whose recent book of poems, Slow Mountain and the Half-Life. He won the 2018 Gwendolyn McGowan Poetry Prize that was in Exile magazine. And he translates from the Swedish and Norwegian and writes in English too. Roger.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to read the poem that's in the anthology. It is slightly revised, and it will perhaps make more sense if I explain that I have been asked in Norway more than once whether I am an Indian. Why I am not an Indian? I'm an Indian because you've never seen one or you wouldn't ask. I am not an Indian because I am a Jew, and don't ask what percentage. When I say Jew, I mean through and through, though few who are Orthodox would say so. It's true no one knows where we came from, and my mother's mother with a tan could have looked Mongolian, could have come from people who millennia before wandered eastward with their horses and eventually rode into the cowboy films of my New York childhood, where she, escaped from the pogroms, held a sugar cube between her teeth to sweeten her lemony Russian tea. But no, I am not an Indian. So look again, look in. The second poem I'm going to read is called Pitch Black Days, an expression that I encountered in Call It Sleep, Sleep by Henry Roth, and it supposedly means the past, pitch black days. So I suppose this is a bit like saying the past isn't even past, as Faulkner put it. Pitch black days. The pitch black days are still full of light. They lived in the high latitudes of and in winter shone with snow. If only they had slowly turned into the shadowed half and lost themselves in equatorial torpor. The rabbi was wrong. If it was long ago, then long ago was already too late for your weeping. Like yesterday, Reb, it will never fade while I breathe. At least about this I was right from the start. I am the proof, as if that helps. Bright memory burns heart to an ember of tar. The pitch black days are now. And on that cheerful note, I am pleased to introduce W. Luther Jett, author of 3 poetry chapbooks, Not Quite, poems written in Our Situation, and Everyone Disappears.
Thank you. This is the poem that is in the anthology. It's called Remembrance. This is the suit. I only wear once a year, if I'm lucky, on Yom Kippur, the Day of Remembrance. My mother's house sits entirely empty tonight. Not even a cobweb remains, and on Monday, the house will be sold to a man I have not met, but who, I am sure, is kind. The last time I spoke with my mother was a long and difficult phone call. The threads of it frayed and straggling. I was about to ring off when I remembered to tell her I wouldn't be calling the next Friday night. It will be Yom Kippur, I explained. Yom Kippur, she repeated. Hours later, my phone rang, and it was not her. And that was the year I wasn't so lucky and wore this suit more than once. Most of you know that Passover, Pesach, begins next Saturday night, so I'm going to read a Passover poem. At least one person in this audience has actually heard this poem before. It is called Mi Mitzrayim, which can be translated as Out of the Narrows. Word passing at midnight in rustling streets narrow, creak of wagon wheel upon dry cobble, phantom voices watched over by fugitive stars. To be gone by morning is the key. The lock at last shattered, code broken, no time left to reconsider, only to trace shadow passages leading out from the closed circle of darkness into the east, into the sea. Behind us, night. Ahead, the pale blue fringe of unknown dawn and strange fire calling. Imagine what's left. The discovery at daybreak, silent alleys, empty rooms, grain scattered in the dust, vacant windows overlooking Needle's eye. And what are we but ghosts departing for a bridge through water, having no shape yet in order to become solid, whole, holy. And now it is my honor to introduce Helene Krauthamer, who teaches English, not creative writing though, at the University of the District of Columbia, and has been writing poetry since third grade.
Thank you so much, and I'm so honored to be here, and especially sponsored by the Writers Center. I attended several workshops at the Writers Center with teachers Martin and Laura and Jean. I don't know if you remember me. And also among some colleagues here, I recognize a few of my colleagues out there. So I'm going to read, I think it's the shortest poem in the anthology, so I won't be taking up much of your time. It's called Soul Food. Perhaps the universe began with a sprinkling of yeast, stardust, water, time and space for the mix to expand and contract in the warmth of a billion suns, pounding and kneading the cosmic bagel. And I missed the part of the email that said, bring some more poetry. So I'm just going to recite a poem that my other published poem, the only other published poem I have, that goes something like this. Okay, never mind. I can't remember it. I'm going to introduce you next to Merrill Leffler, whose most recent book of poetry is Mark the Music. He's the publisher of Dryad Press. He was Tacoma Park, Maryland's Poet Laureate from 2011 to 2018.
Merrill, you need to turn your microphone on.
Okay, sorry. I'm used to being unmuted. Muted here. This is called What I Want of It, and of course it's in the anthology. I wanted to graze like gazelles and soar with the aplomb of eagles. I wanted to rise like a palace of syllables of breath. I wanted to open locked gates with obscure incantations. And I wanted to kick down locked doors and lead into meadows of starlight. I wanted to light up the night with meteors of radiance and desire. I wanted to inflame the coldness of my heart and set passion on fire. I wanted to waken the mountain gods and startle the dead from boredom. I wanted to revive my ancestors and ask for their blessings. I wanted to guide me through deserts year after year and lead me to water and wild fruit. I wanted to open my eyes and reveal angels ascending and descending in my own backyard. So I'm going to read a small poem. It's a stanzaic poem, and it's called Farewell. In these faces, it is always farewell. You may see yourself here or not. You may walk a straight line to hell and arrive through the front door or knock without thinking at the back. You may be schooled in caution like a spy and count every step and still backtrack into the arms of the enemy. You may crawl on your knees for 100 years and engrave a yellow star on your breast. You may try and cover your fears and pretend you have come to a rest. Dear friends, we are traveling this way alone. Finally, there are no lies. Minute by minute, day by day, each life is a blessing, each blessing a disguise. So now I would like to introduce Yvette Neisser. We have her correct pronunciation from before, but well known in Washington. She's the author of Grip, which was the 2011 Giron Press Poetry Awards, a Spanish poetry translator that she is, and a founder of the DC Area Literary Translators Network, DC Alt. Yvette?
Thank you, Merrill. I'm a little windblown up here because I'm on the roof of my building. I'm going to start with the poem in the anthology. It takes place on Yom Kippur. It's called The Whole Imperfect Lot of Us. You must change your life, say the rabbis of old. Shine a mirror inside yourselves. Examine your flaws. Scrub the soul clean. As we sit in silence, one boy cannot control his voice. Now and then he lets out a howl, shaking us out of contemplation. Bless him for digging deep. Bless us all, the whole imperfect lot of us. The ones with hair combed neatly and those with unruly hair. The ones who stand still in prayer and those who shuffle from foot to foot. The ones who pray aloud and those who pray silently. The ones who barely mutter the words and those who simply hum the tune. The ones with eyes fixed on the prayer book and those whose eyes wander the room. Bless the one whose voice awakens us and those who look away. Thank you. And since the cherry blossoms have started blooming, I'm compelled to read this one. Yoshino Cherry. You'd think nothing could penetrate that bark, silvered and solid as a wall. Yet flowers burst straight from the trunk. First a tiny shoot, a spray of buds, then bouquets of blossoms. These petals, translucent to the touch, veined and edged in pink. Cherry tree, show me how to draw beauty from the rough spots, how surfaces can shift. Iron into flower, stasis into flux. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Jean Nordhaus. Her 6 volumes of poetry include Memos from the Broken World, The Porcelain Apes of Moses Mendelssohn, Innocence, and My Life in Hiding.
Thank you. It's great to be here among you, among so many friends. It seems just right to be reading this poem at the moment because I am reading from Taos, New Mexico, where some of the poem takes place. It's called Interfaith, about an interfaith marriage. We made a deal. We would celebrate all holidays, though we believed in none. The more the merrier, Santa Claus and Hanukkah gelt, Easter eggs and matzo balls. Bonfires at the Pueblo on Christmas Eve, as the men in their blankets and guards in their uniforms lifted the wobbly Virgin in her painted sukkah to their shoulders and danced her around the plaza, guns going off, bonfires crackling, bullet casings scattered in the sand. It was all a panoply, a glorious jumble of old and new, a shopping spree. Why limit ourselves to one God, one tribe, when we could have them all? We believed in life, in celebration. The bottle of champagne tucked on its side in the fridge, in case. Now that you are beyond all revelry, I've joined the synagogue of skeptics, where I belong, where I'm at last at home. And I'll also read a Passover poem. It's called Afikomen, When Asked for a Passover Poem. I've written the soup, the parting of the sea, the savage plagues and the candles, how they guttered when the door fell open for Elijah. Wind from the apartment hallway where a shadow of flame tongued incinerator walls. What more can I write of ritual foods and repetitions, exile and return? Let it mean what we need it to mean. This year, the flood of refugees and Pharaoh's fear of foreigners. Why then, when you ask for a poem, am I haunted by the afikomen? That shy half matzah wrapped in a napkin babushka and spirited away to be hidden in a corner cabinet behind a bookcase in a cushion, reluctant as Moses to be chosen. And only hours later, when the children are nodding and we're flushed with sweet wine and singing, remembered and rescued, redeemed for $1, a pittance, a coin. And I am pleased to introduce Linda Pastan, whose name I do know how to pronounce. It's her 14th book, Insomnia, was published in 2015 and won the Towson University Prize for Literature. In 2003, she won the Ruth Lilly Prize for Lifetime Achievement.
Thank you, Jean. My poem from the anthology is called Kristallnacht, which I spent some time on the internet trying to learn how to pronounce properly in German and couldn't do so. I just have to be Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht was the word I heard my parents whisper behind closed doors. And I pictured the world under a sudden enchantment of ice, each tree limb braceleted in crystal, each lamppost, each windshield glazed and electrically gleaming, the very air wincing with light. And the only sound would be a myriad tinkling as of 1,000 miniature wind chimes. The treacherous beauty of words, crystal night, the stars themselves blazing and frozen in place. and a much earlier poem, A Short History of Judaic Thought in the 20th Century. The rabbis wrote, although it is forbidden to touch a dying person, nevertheless, if the house catches fire, he must be removed from the house. Barbaric, I say, and who may I touch then? Aren't we all dying? You smile, your old negotiators smile and ask, but aren't all our houses burning? And I'm very happy to introduce Kim Roberts. She's the editor of By Broad Potomac Shore, Great Poems from the Early Days of our nation's capital. And she's also author of 5 poetry books. Kim.
Thank you. The anthology is gorgeous. I want to thank Nancy and Matthew again for all the hard work in putting this together. I think it's especially important for a book like this to exist at a time of rising hate crimes in this country. Just thrilled to be included. This poem from the anthology is called Prophecy. The sword of Damocles hovers over the sliced pastrami. The lox glistens with nervous sweat. The dill trembles and hides among the pickles. The base. The delicatessen, and you will not keep mine. I come from a long line of heroes. Isaac the Great, who could eat an entire brisket at one sitting. Seymour the Accursed, whose stories had no beginning and no end. Herschel the Terrible, who took all comers at Mahjong. Stanley the Proud, renowned for his hand-eye coordination. The long arm of Aaron, and my rumpled Uncle Saul, liberator of wind. Warriors each in their own way. The chopped liver exudes an ill-starred augury, pocked with portents of diced boiled egg, which only a trained Haruspex, such as I, can read. I am as prescient as a glass display case, as weather-wise as a prune sibyl, but will you listen? Will you learn? And I'll read one short, newer poem. This is a love poem called On Roosevelt Bridge. For those of you who are not local, Roosevelt Bridge is one of the bridges that crosses the Potomac River, going from Virginia into the District of Columbia. On Roosevelt Bridge. My desire for you this evening is not done, where I bridge inopportune distance, where I cross the river into my city, fluid around my heart. I am breaking out of the lanes, beyond the red shore of brake lights. With you, I am swimming out. I am not done with you. The rules of the road, the demarcated lines, driving home on the highway. The body I desire at inopportune distance, though I am leaving your house, though I am leaving your housing. Michael Salzman is our next reader. He's editor of the anthology Poetry and Medicine and author of the poetry books The Clock Made of Confetti and Shades and Graces, which was the 2020 inaugural winner of the Daniel Hoffman Legacy Book Prize.
Thank you. Sitting Shmira is, I guess, the 9/11 poem in this brilliant anthology. Sitting Shmira. Outside the morgue on 1st and 30th Street, a canopy has been erected next to 3 truckloads of mixed body parts. Under the tent, teams of young yeshiva girls sit shmira, watching over the dead in 4-hour shifts. What should take only a day has gone on for 8 or 9 weeks. since no one knows who's in these 3 trucks, all the dead cops, candy vendors, bond traders, and unsuspecting passersby, all the uncommon inhabitants of our one Earth's island are assumed converted by fire and ash into one Jew, one blood, and one flesh. Since no one can be buried like this, no one can be properly mourned. But hour after hour, the sweet melodies of psalms rise over the conversos until a light is lit in David's garden, a moon with a broken edge, its author as anonymous as any victim. And the second poem is also an older poem of mine called Lech Lecha. It's for the Parsha that I read at my bar mitzvah. And the epigraph says, to the land that I will show you. Go, go, go from this land, from your relatives, from your father's house, from your past. Easy enough, you say. 50 years ago, I set out, a small knit cap on my head. The curve of my skull echoed in the great bowl of Talmud Torah's dome on Coney Island Avenue. I'm creeping up on Abraham, almost as old as he was, in Lech Lecha, my Torah portion, ready to set off with Lot and Sarah, all their wealth and the souls they had made in Haran, the place they were leaving for Canaan. The souls they had made, not their children, the sweet little bodies they held and washed, kissed and fed. It's the souls they had made that are taken. But Sarah and Abraham had no children then, only servants and converts, those ready to follow them into the wilderness. Perhaps the servants or Lot had the children. I'm stuck in the text, unclear as to the referent implied by the noun phrase and its definite article, the souls, a little like Joyce in The Dead, looking around at everyone. Did God mean for them to take their own souls, Lot's and Sarah's and Abraham's, the ones they had made for themselves, sojourning in a foreign land? But then I gave a little speech about the awe I felt, standing before the ark, speaking directly to God. But now I'm counting souls, made and unmade, given and withheld in the land to which I've been taken or led. And it's my pleasure to introduce Mark Everett Seagull, a retired professor of psychology who's written poetry for decades without the goal of publication. He's been legally blind since 12 and now studies and plays the guitar. Helene Krauthamer will read his poems.
Thank you. Lamentations. I am my beloved's and my beloved's mine. Why must I wander among the apple trees, tranching silver, gold, and purple nigun of Kaddish, not sung before to her, this anniversary of wedding nights. Spiced wine from my broken cup spills on the grass of her new grave. Later, I leave a stone and 3 evening stars. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Myra Sklarou, who is an emerita professor and the founder of the MFA program at American University, the former president of the Yaddo Artist Community, and winner of the National Jewish Book Award in 1977, and has written A Survivor Named Trauma in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to read one poem. There are a lot of words in the poem that have to do with what one wears if you're religious in a service and certain things. Anyway, what is a Jewish poem? Does it wear a yarmulke and tallis, Does it live in the diaspora and yearn for homeland? Does it wave the lulav to and fro inside a plastic sukkah or recite the 7 benedictions under the huppah? I wonder, what is a Jewish poem? Does it only go to synagogue one day a year, attaching the tefillin like a tiny black stranger to its left arm? Does it open the stiff skins of the prayer book to reveal the letters like blackened platelets twisting within? Little yeshiva bocher, little Jewish poem, waving your side curls, whispering piyut to me in my sleep. Little Jewish poem in your strimal hat, little grandfather, sing to me. Little Jewish poem, come sing to me. And is Katherine Smith here?
Thank you. I am.
Oh, then let me introduce you. Katherine Smith's publications include appearances in Boulevard, North American Review, Cincinnati Review, Missouri Review, Plowshares, Southern Review, as well as 2 books of poetry, Argument by Design, published in 2003, and Woman Alone on the Mountain, Iris Press, 2014.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to read 2 poems, and the first poem I'm going to read is in the voice of a young girl who was in the Kindertransport, and she finds her way to the United States, to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, October 1944. This poem is set. And so I'm going to read this poem. It's in her voice, Fire Pit. In a circle, boys and girls baptized in safety's holy light flirt and reach twigs threaded with puffs of charred marshmallow, dripping meat. The girls' hair carefully tied back, the boys like priests in chinos and plaid shirts. Though I half expect them to have vanished, their faces still flicker and glow each time I look up from Oak's furnace. Inside embers, rooms of fires, a woman on the Bergenstrasse scrubs cobblestones beneath the gaze of a boy no older than my brother. I lift a heavy curtain in London. Behind it, rubble where once our neighbor's house stood. Women's faces glow against the curtains, tell me to stand back. And then, not trusting words to keep me safe, load me onto a cargo plane across the ocean to mountains in Tennessee, hidden city circled by fences, white oak. We crumple old newspapers for the bonfire at the Kitty Club's teen night, wait patiently for kindling to catch, then sit on benches or on the leaf-covered ground in 2 rows. I lean against the shoulder of a boy who teases. I flew across the world for his kiss. He nuzzles my hair, my neck. The flame rises white hot, licking memory, burning until I almost believe him. And now I'm going to introduce, and I am sorry if I don't get the name right, Pla Borsheim, the next reader. She has written Moon on the Mountain, Moon on the Meadow, collected poems, 2 Winters, Mother Mail, love poems, and her book, which comes out this year, is Above the Birch Line. It's coming out in 2021.
Thank you, Katherine. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this beautiful anthology and for inviting me. I'm going to read the first poem from the anthology, Sanctuary. Shabbat Shirah, and we 12 women gather at the sea. We pray, sing, and laugh together, cook up old tales and soup, add just enough spice to keep the tongue wanting more. Large-breasted, large-hearted, we hear each other's sorrows as the ocean licks the shore. We chop onions, saute the mushrooms, braise the meat of friendship, sink our teeth into the chicken bone, its juicy flesh no less delicious than our own. Stay a while. Rock in this chair. Look out over pelicans and dolphins who swoop and dive, their fins and feathers swelling in salt air. Let me breathe this holy union for the rest of my life. May we scatter home to unite again, our pursuers vanquished, we grains of sand, we stars in the sky. And then I'll read one from a chapbook called Love Poems. My husband and I were both widowed quite young. I raised 6 children, he raised 2, and we met at age 60 via JDate for David. And this is set in Ann Arbor in Nichols Arcade, if any of you are familiar with that long, beautiful line of shops. For David. Off the street, past the corner guitar man, we turn left into the long arcade. Its glass-topped ceiling dribbles the last rain as evening slows the clouds. Shops line the walkway, small flags draped at each bell-clapped door. Here we find perfumes, stationery, that silk tie you've wanted, or cinnamon rolls at the baker's steaming up the window. A constable sits his horse, clopping down the cobbled lane. A child flits past, a clump of ribbons streaming from her hand, while a gaggle of teens, furtive, smirks at us, at our arm-in-arm gait, our middling paunches. No matter. We amble on. A wisp of curry scents the damp air as you reach for me, your hands in my hair, your lips on my cheek. In the near dark, we 60-somethings still grow breathless, still laugh out loud, our voices startling the birds who rise. Thank you. And over to Nancy.
Oh, I'm breathless hearing these wonderful voices and these poems coming to life in the voices of the authors who wrote them. Wonderful. I see that we have time. We can go on till 3:30. Matthew has tried to come, but is not able to with internet problems. So because he was going to read something, I'll read something if that's okay. And then we'll see if there are any questions from the audience. So this one is called We Weren't So Jewish Then. Dangling our faith on a golden chain, we gave our children Old Testament names like Matthew and Aaron and Ruth to honor the family dead who kept piling up faster each year. A whirlwind of covered mirrors, black ribbons, and yahrzeit candles burning in glass, and words like bracha and yitzka at graveside prayer, layering stone upon stone like ancient tropes. But still we wedded outside the tribe, drawn to men who'd never donned a skull cap, yet stomped on glass, timid shards in their souls, to prove their accepting love. Our mothers defied, turned away, and closed their eyes each Shabbat, gathering candlelight in their hands, a vigil to combat the dark they feared we brought upon ourselves. more dreadful than any epithet sprayed on our walls. Thank you. So I'm looking here for questions from the audience. And is that a question? That's Happy Pesach. Good. Do we have any questions from the audience? If you can wave or write it in the chat box, we'll see if you do.
Nancy, there's a question in the chat box from Mindy.
Oh, okay. I'm not seeing that. Oh, yes, I am. Thank you, Yvette. How do you decide among the 800 submissions on what to include? Did you see any recurring themes and subjects? Perhaps there will be a volume 2. Well, that's an interesting thought. Thank you, Mindy. I think when you look at poems that people send you, and many of you here of the readers and many of you in the audience too, have had that experience of having to go through submissions. And the whole process is so difficult, submissions. So I think when we looked at, I can't speak for Matthew, but for me, I wanted to honor each submission. I wanted to read each submission from start to finish, every poem there, because I felt at least I was doing that and giving them a good read. But in my way of looking at submissions, and I'm right now judging some contest at a college of undergrads and some graduate students, I read through everything and I make a pile of definite no's. Then I make a pile of maybe no, maybe yes, and yes. And I don't know, for this anthology, we had no idea how many we would end up having. So we had that open, that number, and we wanted to see if the submissions helped us along. And by the time we were done, and there were sometimes in the Excel spreadsheets that Matthew was great with, we would go, oh yeah, this is maybe yes, maybe no, yes, no, yes, yes. So then we each did that. And then we looked at each other's, and then we discussed each other's, and we negotiated a little bit. And then we thought, we're close to 100 here. And then it turned out that we miscounted, so we had 101. But our editor said she liked the idea of 101. She said that was sexier than 100. And then we also made that decision to have one poem by everybody, so that we'd have a multitude of voices speaking, non-Jewish voices, translated voices, Jewish voices on different themes. So we also didn't want to have every poem on the Holocaust. And we talked about how we were going to handle Palestine and Israel, and whether we wanted this anthology to be a political statement. We had a lot of thinking to do, but eventually we were able to choose poems that span the gamut of the range of many, many different themes. What is a Jewish poem? We could spend the whole afternoon talking about that. And indeed, at the JCC Buffalo, where we did an anthology reading, that was a topic that we discussed. And of course, there's no answer. So Matthew and I made up our minds the best we could. I hope that answers the question. Any other questions for us? Any questions from our readers to another reader?
Well, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, well, thank you all for reading today. I read a lot of poetry from different peoples, and I was attracted to the title of the volume you have here. And the history, I like the variety that I've heard, and it's engaging. And hopefully when I look forward, I read poetry to gauge the understanding of a people, whether they're Native Indians or Afro-Americans or Asians even. So this will be the first volume of Jewish poetry that I would encounter, and I look forward to reading more.
Thank you so much for saying that. And we wanted this anthology to appeal not only to card-carrying Jewish people, which is also another difficult to define concept. And they say that with all the Talmud scholars, you could have a group of Talmud scholars who would find different things and argue about what even the words on the page refer to. And so I think we're delighted that the book has had some appeal to you. Thank you. So I'm not a fan of keeping people longer than what is organically there. And so if I don't see other questions in the chat book, I want to thank the readers once again for just a brilliant reading. And I want to thank Zach and the Writers Center for making this happen. And I want to thank you, the audience, who came to hear us this afternoon and gave us an audience. So we want to wish you a happy Passover if you're celebrating, and happy Easter and other things that you're celebrating. And we hope to see you again at an event at the Writers Center. Thank you.